Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Open Forum podcast. Today, we have with us Michael Yon. Michael is an award winning combat correspondent, having visited over 90 countries over the last few decades, traveling to multiple conflict zones, reporting on what's truly happening on the ground through the fog of war. As well as that, he's also known as the man who hunted cannibal groups, finding Westerners involved in cannibal groups. And he's been fairly recently now, 2023, but kicked out of Hong Kong during the protests back in 2020. There's a plethora of things that we can talk about with Michael. I feel very spoiled to have him on. Michael, look, thank you very much for being able to spend an evening with us. And why don't you take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, and then we're just going to dive on into some of the crazy things that are happening in the world.
No, I appreciate it. I grew up in Florida, Florida boy, catching alligators and snakes and learning how the birds talk and things like that. It's a great place to grow up. A place called Winter Haven, Florida, right in the middle of Florida. And it was actually a strange place to grow up because it was kind of a combination of I would go hunting alligators with my own gun that, I'd be like 11 and 12. I could just go take my gun, and go get my bicycle and go hunt rabbits or whatever, or on the converse side of that, we had this great library, and it was kind of a wealthy town in another regard, because we have the phosphate industry in Polk County, which is the huge industry. And we were the citrus capital of the world, and it was not very far from Disney World, so there was all these magnets for money. Meanwhile, I was living a perfectly good Tom Sawyer life, out hunting gators and snakes. You know what I mean? But with a great library and stuff, and we had really interesting people come. So even if you sit still in Florida, in Winter Haven, we would see people traveling from all over the world because they would come there to Cypress Gardens and go on vacation and stuff. And they would always get lost in our town because it's the city of 100 lakes, right? It only
Mm.
had a population of maybe 20 or 30,000 at the time. But people get lost all the time because of all the lakes. So like if, Avenue I goes down to the road and it stops, and they're like, uh-oh, I didn't find the house I was looking for. It's on the other side of the lake. So you'd be stopped like so many times. I was always a kid, out riding my bike, whatever, and Yankees and other foreigners would always be like, "Hey, where's?" So I got to meet a lot of people, and anyway, that's
Sounds
how I
like
grew
a
up. And
dream of a
then
way
I
to
went off
come up,
to
at
yeah,
least. Yeah.
Then I went off to the army and special forces, and then later on, I lived in Poland for a couple of years. I lived in Germany. I lived in Europe in total for 6 years, or plus 6 years plus at this point. And then, years in Asia and Middle East and that sort of thing, all over the world, really. I spent more than half of my life downrange at this point. Um, I would
Outside of the
say
US. Yeah.
60%. Yeah, probably 60% of my life has been outside of the United States. But inside of the United States, I've been all over that place. I lived and went to school in California and Massachusetts and North Carolina, South Carolina. Got to see it all.
And at the moment, part of that travel has brought you actually over to the Netherlands. You're not too far afield away from myself at the moment. And what was it exactly that brought you over this way? Let's start there, and then we can work on to the war stuff that's going on in Ukraine and Russia later in the talk.
If you look at the places that I actually spend significant time, like Hong Kong, where they kicked me out in 2020, you can see it online, where they're kicking me out. They kicked me out after 7 months. They should have done it after 7 minutes. But I was there watching the fighting and watching them beat young people, hundreds and hundreds of young people beaten, sometimes compound fractures. And CCP was taking over Hong Kong. And so I was actually about to go back to India, and then I saw some major protests in Hong Kong, and I thought, this doesn't look like average protest. These look like possible insurgency based on just stuff, not to go into those details. But then I canceled my latest trip to India, and I flew over to Hong Kong immediately in June of 2019. I was like, oh, these aren't just protests. This is a real movement. There's a difference between like little protest and everybody's angry and goes back home, and an actual building like an insurgency, right? And so I stayed, and then I stayed for about 7 months, and they finally kicked me out. But the point is, you learn a lot of things in every conflict that I go to, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan or Philippines or a year in Nepal. A lot of that was out with the Maoist and that sort of thing, or fighting in Thailand, which was actually pretty kinetic. A lot of people don't even know about. And you learn that conflicts are sort of like mammals, like the difference between a mouse and a blue whale, right? You can sit here and go, well, a mouse and a blue whale, that's pretty far different from each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
One is this big and one's
And
that
one's
big.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, and they have different diets, different habits, different lifestyles, and all life spans and everything. But that's true. And conflicts are like that. They have those huge differences, but they're also very similar. They both have nervous systems. They both have a heart. They both, you know what I mean? They both have babies more or less in the same way. They eat, breathe, give off waste, right? And their metabolisms are more or less very similar, right? As, some expert
The
on that might
basic
argue, but that's the point.
elements of it are pretty
It's
much the
it's
same.
just
Yeah.
it's the same with conflicts, right? So once you've been to a few conflicts, like if you're a veterinarian, if you just study, horses all your life, but you've never seen another animal, then you suddenly see a rabbit, you'll be, wow, this is pretty different. But if you've seen like 10 different ones, then you'll be like, oh, okay, I don't know what'll come next, but it'll work basically. Say it's the same with these conflicts and wars I go to, right? So everyone is different and everyone is the same, right? And so here, if you see the ones I actually go to, because there's conflicts I'm not like a conflict correspondent that I just go off and take photos of people shooting and beating each other. It's not, I'm not going to invest my energies or my risks because, there's only so many risks you can take. And I've really spin,
Yeah.
pushed my
Yeah.
luck way over the limit, and I'm still here. So that's luck, and I realize that. So I'm very judicious in where I spend my time. Hong Kong was very important. CCP was taking Hong Kong, and now they've taken it. One of the ways they took it was weaponized migration, bringing in mainland Chinese into Hong Kong year after year, 100 to 150 a day, bringing in these Han Chinese who speak Mandarin. And in Hong Kong, of course, they speak Cantonese and they're different. I mean, they're smaller in Hong Kong. They look different. Like I can tell them apart instantly, right? And
Mm.
but the mainlanders kept coming in, and that was part of it, was weaponized migration. And then all these other mechanisms where politically isolating Hong Kong, and the same as they're doing to Taiwan now. It goes on and on and on. So why was I in Hong Kong? Because obviously Hong Kong is extremely important for many reasons. One of which is it's an economic hub, but also it's a shipping hub, right? There's a massive port there, right? The port of Hong Kong, and also it's important for naval reasons, right? So I spend a lot of time in Panama. I was just down there. That's where these beautiful items, right? And I'm constantly in places like Mexico or Colombia or something, right? And Panama is got the Panama Canal, right? And not so that's 1 hourglass of the Panama Canal, which is obviously strategically important. And CCP, Chinese Communist Party, is making a go for that big time. They're slowly getting a hold on Panama, right? As they are with El Salvador and Guatemala and Honduras, right? Nicaragua. So and so like there's a Confucius Institute in Panama City. I've been to it. And not only that, there's I was one of the first ones fighting against Confucius Institutes in 2014. If you look up my name in Confucius Institute, you'll see me going after those in 2014. Most people didn't hear about them for 5 more years, right? So I
Interesting.
mean, yeah, and so so there's also a main conduit of weaponized migration coming through from Africa and Asia, and for instance, including China. They go to South America. They'll go to places like Suriname, Brazil, or the Chinese, they go to Ecuador. Then they funnel up through Colombia, and then they go through Panama through the Darien Gap, right? So I spent a lot of time in the Darien Gap watching them come through, and then they go off. Like at this point, like as of today, I was just talking with somebody there. It's about 1,000 people per day, which is, it's not a big number actually compared to what's coming across our southern border, but 1,000 a day is a big number,
Mm.
but it's even small. It's even dwarfed by, in February alone, we had at least 150,000 come through just over the borders. That does not include the people that came through, like landed in Atlanta or
Legal
LAX
means.
airport in New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or who came in and then were stopped by customs at actually landing in Miami or something. We're talking about just people that come over the Texas border, Arizona, New Mexico, California, or wash up on the beaches of Florida, right? And some are coming over the Canadian border now, right? So that was a solid 150,000 just through those methods in just 1 month of February, right? So the weaponized migration is one aspect. I saw that in Hong Kong. I've seen it in Lithuania. I've seen it here. I mean, it's highly weaponized. It's in the United States, and this has happened in the 30s in Ukraine. Stalin did it with Ukraine, of course, and a lot of more in the 32, 33 famine. Actually went a little longer than that. But anyway, to put bookends on it, it was really rough in 32, 33. But and the whole idea was to kulakization. In other words, to label people as kulaks and then kill the kulaks and take their farmland, right? And replace them. So this is an old strategy. So when I say these things, it's not me just my imagination running wild. It's me reading stacks and stacks of books and going to places and living overseas and watching this happen in different countries. And so now, why Hong Kong? Why Panama? And why Netherlands? There's specific reasons I spend so much time in these places and a few others, right? If you look at the Belt and Road Initiative, the huge Chinese infrastructure projects that are being built around the world, you'll see a train that goes from Shanghai and Chengdu and all these other places and goes right across Asia, right? And it's right not far from me here, and it goes right to Rotterdam, right?
Yep.
And so this is, I've been to the bookends, Shanghai to here, right? And a lot in between. This is the other bookend. And so here, the WEF CCP, you got to keep in mind, the World Economic, they call it the WEF here in Netherlands.
Yep.
The World Economic Forum, the WEF, is not just cooperating with CCP. I used to think they were just cooperating. Now, the more I've learned about them, I see they're co-sanguinated. They are.
You think they're
really,
working hand in glove?
Oh, big time.
See,
I mean, because that's it. Eventually, they're going to fight each other. That's clear.
This
But
is
right
what
now,
I'm thinking. For where I'm standing, I get the impression that the WEF goals and the Chinese goals, the CCP goals, I should say, are heading in the same direction, but they both have different endpoints. And this is why I think that they're working closely together, because they all want the same thing, this element of control and whatnot. But at the same time, there seems to be some disagreement. So if you look at, let's say, the main players in the WEF and how they're cooperating with regards to the Russia-Ukraine situation, China is on the other end looking to broker peace deals. And yet, as we look at Canada, as we look at the Netherlands, as we look at the UK, Germany, etc., 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 they're pushing forward to the point where Boris Johnson is known to have gone over to Ukraine last year in March or April to put a stop to peace talks. And if this is how the guys on the WEF side are behaving, but China is looking to create the BRICS partnership, and also it looks like it's going ahead of getting rid of the petrodollar with Saudi Arabia. I get the impression that, gold back. I get the impression that although they may have similar ideals, they're not quite hand in glove just yet. And I know we've kind of sidestepped a little bit for the why you're here in the Netherlands, but I'm sure you'll circle back to that.
I mean, it's clear that, like, I think you said it perfectly. They're going parallel at this point, and I would say even co-saying. I mean, they're really entwined. I mean, there's the annual meetings in Davos. There's also annual meetings in China, right? So, except they've been doing those online since the pandemic. So, but they've had the annual meetings there as well. But they let's just call them that co-sanguination. Let's call that globalist, right? And but the ship of globalism has two major captains. One is Xi, let's say the Chinese Communist Party headed by, for life, Xi, and then the World Economic Forum. And Klaus Schwab is not the leader. He's clearly a meat puppet. He's the chairman or whatever, but he's clearly not in charge. And he's a face, right? And so anyway, these two, they have different endpoints. Eventually, they're going to fight. That much is clear, right? I mean, and both of them know this, of course. Both sides are quite intelligent, and so, but both sides have an interest, for instance, in taking these farms here where I'm at now. So I'm in right now at Egmond aan Zee, which is on the sea, in Netherlands, right? And not too far from The Hague, maybe an hour, right? And but the idea here is to take these farms and make tri-state city. I was on with Jordan Peterson the other day. In fact, it just started to air about maybe 4 hours ago on YouTube. So you can see my interview with Jordan Peterson just went online, and with Ava of Lardingerbroek,
Yeah.
actually, it's us three. And we talked about tri-state city. Tri-state city is this, tri-state is three states, Belgium, Germany, and Netherlands. So tri-state city is this smart city, quote unquote, that will comprise actually most of Netherlands. You can see the map if you look online, tri-state city. So it's meant to be a smart city, a smart, one of these 15-minute cities. They don't call it a concentration camp because you would not go to it then, or you wouldn't cheer for it. But the idea of taking this land from the farmers is multifaceted. One is they want the land to make tri-state city, right? That's why I'm in Netherlands. That's why I'm not in some other place like Ukraine right now. This is even bigger than that. Although Ukraine's quite big, we could end up in a thermonuclear war. But this is all part of the same thing. And so tri-state city is, you look online, you'll see map of it. It's quite huge, right? And they've already started working on it. This isn't theoretical. There's a big website for it, and in English and other languages. And you'll see that the ports of Rotterdam, which is the biggest port in all of Europe, and the second biggest port, Antwerp in Belgium, are the two biggest ports in Europe, are in Tri-State City. And what are they at the end of? The Belt and Road Initiative, the railway from China all the way to here. So I mean, it's not a coincidence that this is that I'm here, or that they are really focusing efforts to take this land from these farmers. Now, another reason to take the land from the farmers is the same reason that Stalin did, and like Mao did as well. You want the farmers will tend to have a really strong connection to the land and history and tradition. For instance, the government of Netherlands several years ago, they've not really outlawed, but say forbidden the use of government people for using the word Holland. You're not supposed to say this is Holland anymore, right? This is Netherlands, because Holland evokes the
nationalism.
Right. And they don't want you to be. And so, like with Stalin and with not just the Holodomor, but in other parts of the big fight in the Soviet Union, you wanted to get those farmers off, so they labeled them kulaks, right? So when you do these labels, whether it's Jew or kulak or Polish, like making the Polish people wear the P, or the Jews with the Star of David, or the kulaks, they just like, hey, these are kulaks. First, you make that label very evil, right?
It's that demonization. Yeah.
Exactly. Demonize the label, because everybody be like, yeah, kulaks are terrible or whatever. Or in the old days, Jews are terrible or Polish are terrible. And then they just, or first, you often they'll make the term quite terrible. And then when they're ready, they'll hang the same term that you helped make terrible. They're going to hang it around your neck. Right. Right. Yeah. Thank you for helping us make this thing terrible. And now it's hanging on you. So for instance, with the kulaks in Ukraine, Stalin then said, hey, the reason that your prices are so high, the reason your life is so bad is because of these terrible kulaks. They stole the land from your ancestors. Go take their farms. It's yours. Run them off or kill them, and that farm is yours. And that's what happened. They got rid of them, genocide, and then it was a huge famine, right? Because the people that took over the farm, you can't just take over. That's like a monkey taking over an airplane, right? Monkeys, I call it monkeys in the cockpit. You get a bunch of monkeys in the cockpit, like, hey, a bunch of chimpanzees killed the crew or ran them out. They can't fly the airplane. It's like say I used to see this with Al Qaeda all over Iraq. When Al Qaeda would take, like Bakuba, the city of Bakuba in Diyala province, they had effective control over it for a while, and the water stopped working, the electricity stopped working. The monkeys could run the government away, but they can't run anything.
No.
I mean, any monkey can come in with an AK and explosives and knives and do stuff, but running a city, that takes actually higher level thinking, right? It requires people that go to work and come home and have a family and keep things stable.
Do some further planning and that stability. Yeah,
exactly. And so this is what when the kulaks were destroyed over in Ukraine, It just ended up in famine, right? And it happened it happened with Pol Pot in Cambodia and China with Mao with the Great Famine, and likewise, these countries in Africa. Let's go kill the white people and starve to death, right? Go to
Yeah.
cannibalism.
Well, just because those listening from the Netherlands will have heard a different story, and the story those in the Netherlands will have heard of, actually people across the world will have not heard of the removing the farmers and whatnot. But what they will have heard is that the farmers are protesting against nitrogen regulations, and it's the nitrogen regulations that are the issue. What what's the truth there? Because at the end of the day, nitrogen, okay, they're saying that's the really bad greenhouse gas, blah, blah, blah. This is all about sustainability. This is to do with Agenda 2030 of the United Nations and EU goals of no, we need to make everything carbon neutral, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a sustainability goal for the environment. So that's what's being given to the people on the outside, the people that are unaware of what's been happening behind closed doors. And you've already mentioned what you call HOP, human osmotic pressure, of the migration issues and things. But for those listening who are uninitiated, they're stopping already at the barrier. They're saying, hold on a minute, you're talking about the farms going, and this is about destroying and causing famine, et cetera, et cetera. We're told this is about nitrogen.
Not about nitrogen, or as they call it here in Netherlands, Stickstoff, which is
Yeah.
the same word in Germany, by the way, Stickstoff, nitrogen. As you know, roughly 79% of each breath we're taking right now is nitrogen.
Nitrogen.
Right?
Yeah.
That's how poison it is. And so it's
It's
not a
awful.
greenhouse gas. I mean, so all these plants and things that we eat, rice, it's filled with nitrogen. So I mean, uh, nitrogen. We could talk about this for hours.
It's
Right now,
ridiculous, but it's the people are going to sit here listening and have no idea. They're going to think that that's the thing that's doing it.
oh, it's complete nonsense. It's complete. It's not even worth. If you read the book "Rape of the Mind," it's a 1956 book, or sometimes they'll say 19. I've read the book. I've read it very closely. It's a great book by a Dutch, happen to be in Netherlands, but
Joost
written by
Meerlo
a
or
Dutch.
something.
That's right,
Yeah.
Joost Meerlo, and he was a medical doctor and a psychoanalyst, right? And he wrote this incredible book on brainwashing, and he'll talk about how when you'll bring up these just nonsense things and get people to argue about them, that you're winning. You're getting them to argue about nitrogen. Watch them go. Furbies are arguing nitrogen. No, it's not. No, that's not too much nitrogen. So the thing to do with this is don't even argue about the nonsense. You know what I mean? Like you see all these people arguing about statistics on quote unquote vaccines that aren't even vaccines, right?
Gene
So they're
therapies.
arguing about
Yeah.
all these statistics from where do you even get these? Just stop arguing. It's all nonsense. And this is a case where ad hominem is actually appropriate. You know what I mean? You're like, I know you're not supposed to do ad hominem. We're raised, and all these fallacies you learned about in logic in school. I learned about them when I was, don't slippery slope is a logical fallacy. And I get, as I travel around the world, I'm like, slippery slope's not a logical fallacy. That's bullshit. It's a fallacy to think slippery slope is a fallacy. Slippery slope happens all the time.
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely.
but we're taught that slippery slope is a fallacy, right? It's not. It's just simply not. And ad hominem at times is actually appropriate. Like, who is the one bringing in all this nitrogen idea? Nitrogenous fertilizer. It's the communists and the authoritarians, the WEF and the CCP, all these various groups that then combine their forces, right? I mean, it's just an information campaign. Here, let's argue about these glasses cause global warming, right? Well, no, those glasses don't. Like 3 hours later, we're talking about the glasses still, Meanwhile, they're just running off with the farm. We're talking about nitrogen, and they're like, yeah. So, so don't even argue about that. It's interesting in Rape of the Mind. If you read the book, it's really an important book to read. Read Rape
Fantastic
of the
book.
Mind.
I read it on your
Yeah.
recommendation, actually.
Good
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And once you read that and then you watch the movie 1984 again, most people have probably seen the movie or read the book. Then after you read Rape of the Mind and then you watch 1984 or read it, you're like, I see exactly what, I think, when was that? 1948, that book was written, was 1984 was written in 1948, right?
1948. Yeah, yeah.
And so, and he just inverted it. But you'll see the techniques like droning on about statistics. Like you'll see the people coming up, what you eat is controlled, when you eat is controlled, when you exercise is controlled, the compelled speech, wrong think, and all these sorts of things, right?
The
And so,
ritualistic
what
nature of the repetition
exactly
as well. Yeah.
what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say, controlling specific words, like they'll have you arguing for like 3 weeks whether or not it's actually a
Gender
vaccine.
pronouns. Yeah.
Meanwhile, oh yeah,
Okay.
meanwhile they're like shooting you in the arm. It's like this is when we go ad hominem. It's like don't even hit me with this gender pronoun bullshit. I don't take you seriously. If you're waving these rainbow flags, when I go to all these protests around in Portland or Atlanta or Washington D.C. or going around in and I go around Germany or places, not necessarily protests, but every time I see these Ukrainian flags, what do I see next to it? Rainbow. When I'm out in the fighting with Antifa and they're throwing Molotov cocktails at the police and whatnot, they'll have rainbow flags and BLM flags, right? You know what I mean? It's like the people that are burning down cities are flying what? Rainbow flags, Ukraine flags, rainbow flags, BLM flags. This is brainwashing techniques, right? And again, if I even say that, people go, "Oh, he's against gays." No, there you go. Never said that. Never said it. I'm telling you, when you're waving these things and you're getting all vaxxed up, you know what I mean, and you're taking the death jabs or not vaccines, you're arguing about these things. You are absolutely losing. And you'll see, for instance, in 1984, or rape of the mind, or listen, I've studied war for many years. I spent many years in different wars and conflicts. A lot of that was kinetics, endless firefights, bombings, all kinds of things. I did the kinetics, but the higher level of warfare is information warfare. That's your PhD level of warfare. It's information warfare. And that's what's going heavy duty here, for instance, in the Netherlands, or was going on back in Hong Kong, like not allowing the Hong Kongers to speak Cantonese, trying to force the children to speak only Mandarin, trying to force them to go ahead, sir.
I, Coming back to the information war with Hong Kong, I don't know if you came across this, but they have actually in schools eliminated any history of the British occupation, and they've changed the textbooks. I've got friends who have family still in Hong Kong with young children, and they're saying, yeah, they're making it look like it never existed. So that information war is literally going to brainwashing the next generation into not even knowing their own history, in the same way that the defector from North Korea, Yomi Park,
Yeah,
the way that she
yeah.
mentioned that their history, everything that they were taught is just an absolute lie, but they're taught that the Sung family, Kim Jong Il family rather, is everything, and that they have created the world, etc., etc. The same thing is now happening in Hong Kong. I don't know if
Oh yeah,
while you were
just
covering it, you
rewriting it.
came across that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this is absolutely. I mean, what you're saying is the truth. It was the truth in East Germany when I was there back when it was still East Germany. It was the truth in Poland. I lived in Poland 2 years. It was still communist, right? So, I mean, it was the truth in all these places. That's how they operate. Speaking of North Korean defectors, there was another North Korean defector named Kim Dong Hook. I'm sorry, I don't recall his name. But in about 2016 or so, I saw him on 60 Minutes. And I'm the one who actually caught that he was a fraud. And I'm going to say this right now. And if you look up online and look up my name and North Korean fraud, you'll see that every once in a while when something happens, like the attack at one of our bases in Helmand Province that took out some Harriers, it was a suicide attack. Every once in a while, an event will happen, and I'll just right when it happens, I'll write, "This just happened. I have not researched it. I'm writing this right now to analyze what happened because I want you to see how well I know this subject." So basically, I'm bragging about myself, right? But I'm trying to prove that I know how to shoot that basketball. What I'm getting to this when it comes to brainwashing, I watched this guy on 60 Minutes, right? And at the end, it was only like 15 minutes that he was on. It was real quick. I immediately published right then. You can see it on Facebook. I said, "A guy I don't believe," or something like that. Kim, whatever his name is. And basically, he was saying a lot of things during the interview, like he knew his birthday. They never know their birthday. And I've spent too much time in these countries. They never know their birthday. It's like, and it's like, and he would have known how to read a map. Guys like that never know how to read a map any more than I can write and read in Mandarin.
Mm.
They don't know how to, and you might think everybody watching this probably can read a map, especially if you're older than, I don't know, 30 or so. You should be able to read a map.
Yeah.
But I mean, a paper map. And you might take for granted that everybody can do that. But that's another language that you speak that you don't even know you speak it, right? It's a graphic language that you know how to do because you learned it since you were a little kid. And you might think that everybody knows how to do it. But guess what? They don't.
No.
And most of the world cannot read a map. You put a map in front of them and they're quite confused. But when he talked about some of the things that he did, and I was like, this guy is a definite fraud. And also his body language, I was like, guys like that never have that body language. So I described all this, right? And I'm like, for these reasons, and I was writing stuff that could have cost me everything I own in a defamation lawsuit. And
Mm.
I acknowledge this. I'm like, if I'm wrong, and he decides to sue me, and he obviously has big backers because he had like New York Times and all these people that were like this author
Behind him.
that
Yeah.
wrote a best-selling book about him. He's getting like honorary PhD at some university and all this stuff. He's traveling the world. He's a superhero telling his story, and I'm like, he's a fraud, right? And about 2 years later or so, he was caught, and he admitted to it. And I was just like, it was so obvious. And New York Times and Wall Street Journal, all these people were writing all these effusively beautiful stories about him. And it was obvious fraud on its face. And it was like, for me, as a boy who grew up catching snakes and alligators and turtles, I can tell the difference between a snake, a turtle, and an alligator. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm seeing somebody like that, so what I'm getting to, let's wrap this back to Netherlands. There's a political party here that just won massively in the polls yesterday, called the BB Better, or they got signs all over Netherlands, BB Better, right? So you see it in Fox News today and all these news stories around the world. People keep flooding me with them. Hey, this is great. The Dutch farmers are standing up. They're going to, just before you and I went on the air, I was talking with a Dutch dairy farmer, a friend of mine, and he voted for him, right?
Mm.
They're called the Boer Bevolk Beweging, right? Which means the people, the Boer Burger. I'm sorry, I don't speak Dutch. I
The
speak
farmer
German,
citizenship something.
yeah, the Boerenburger Beweging, or the farm Beweging in Dutch. The farmer citizen movement, right?
Yeah.
BBB, right? So on all their signs all across Netherlands, I just drove about 800 miles crisscrossing Netherlands talking to farmers before I went on with Jordan Peterson on Sunday. And I saw these signs everywhere. BB Better. I mean, what more do you need to know? It's like, I mean, when I saw the first sign, I was like, why is a BB Better sign in a farmer's field? And I just saw like 20 others in different farmers' fields. Why would farmers allow them to put these? And I was actually with a politician. And he goes, "Oh, this is this party," and I had already, been looking at them before, but now I saw their actual posters for the election were BB Better, because I just flew in. I was just down in Panama watching that take over, in Texas watching the invasion, right? And I was just down in Dominican Republic watching the Dominicans build a wall with the Haitians. You know what I mean? So I'm seeing these things everywhere, and so I see the BB Better thing, and I'm like, that's prima facie of fraudulent, because they will tell you who they are, right? If you're listening, if you know what to listen for, like this guy that with this body language, the Kim Jong, whatever his name was,
Yeah.
the guy, I outed him long before anybody else did. He was telling you who he is, right? And so BB Better. What are their principles that they're going to? First of all, they're admitting that Stickstoff is bad. Okay, that at the best is amazingly stupid. At best. I mean, if you're playing at this level, and if you're a normal person that's not stupid, you don't know how these things go. And because you spent your time working on farms and stuff, you don't spend your time studying information more than the way I do, right?
Mm.
But for somebody who studies information more at a high level, that would be amazingly stupid to admit. That would be like, when a cop knocks on your door and you start just talking with him about everything, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You tell him exactly what you did. I'm guilty of this. Yeah.
You would never admit to Stickstoff. You would never say we're going to negotiate about it, right? But that's and another part of their policy stance is they're going to negotiate about traffic landing at Schiphol Airport, which is the big airport at
Yeah.
Amsterdam, of course,
Yeah.
and possibly knock the traffic down. Who knows, 50%, and other things like this, right? So the bottom line is they come in and they put the farmer outfit on it. I'm a farmer, or we're representing farmers, right? And suddenly they've got this massive funding somehow, right? That should raise a red flag. And they're going to negotiate. Listen, back to Juice Merlo, Rape of the Minor, 1984. Why would you ever discuss the details of nitrogen? You should go total ad hominem. Where are you getting the money? Where just focus. Where are you getting the money? Why is your office in the same office as a pharmaceutical company? Why? Why? Yeah, I
I
mean,
didn't
just
know
little things
that.
like this. I mean, why just go total ad hominem? Ad hominem is not.
So are
Usually,
you
it's
saying
wrong,
there's
or it's
potential
at
that
least
they were
it's bad.
bamboozled, right? Long and short of it, are you saying there's
I would say
potential
that
that
I would I would say
Boren
the
Beweging, Boren Burgers and Beweging is more of a front,
Pied
shall
Piper.
we say?
It's a Pied Piper. I mean, it's two things at once. It's a Pied Piper, which is leading people away from Forum for Democracy and others. I was just at the hotel I'm at now. They just had a big thing here for Forum for Democracy. I was with them watching the election, which they lost terribly.
Hmm.
And they lost, they used to have, I think, 12 seats, right? Now they're down to one, right? And a lot of that was internal personality things and that sort of thing. Like I've been privy to a lot of that, basically personalities went hypergolic and blew up, right? So, but that doesn't mean you should support BBB, right?
Yeah.
I'm not being political so far on the minutia level, other than to say BBB is clearly a Pied Piper to lead people that, and it's going to lead the children, basically the children farmers, let's say, who are very busy. They're highly intelligent people, but they don't study information work. That's not their thing. They study how to make their farms work and that sort of thing, right? And so their BBB has just led people, the children of the village, let's say, out into the forest, and they're going to come back as Trojan horse. They are clearly going for the farms. That is so obvious to me. It's actually painful to
Jesus.
watch.
I
And
had
it's the
no
same with that.
idea.
It's the same with that Korean guy that was a complete and utter fraud. And he admitted to it, by the way. So it's no longer in question whether I'm right or wrong. So I don't have to worry about a defamation lawsuit because he admitted a couple of years later that he was lying about his escape from, I think it was Escape from Camp 14 was the name of the book, or Camp 21 or something.
I'll have a look and put it into the details of the podcast. But look, let's rewind it back a little bit. We've kind of jumped about, but how is it then that this issue with the farmers then wraps into something like Tri-State City and the whole nitrogen parade? How is it that that's also going to work almost to a 15-minute city kind of situation, or with C40? How does all of this wrap together, this stealing the
Uh,
land from the farmers?
that information warfare, right? First of all, they want the land and control of the food. So these things are, I mean, both. First of all, they want the land. And secondly, they want control of the food as well. They want control of the humans that are left when this is over. And so you have this weaponized migration. This is clearly part of a war plan. They're already psychologically preparing Dutch that you may have to take migrants into your house. Like if you're, I mean, there's already a law in the books from World War II. If you may have to take people into your homes, right? Which is
Yes, my wife told
fine,
me about this. Yeah, I thought she was
right?
joking when she said it. Yeah, 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 yeah.
No, and so they haven't ordered anybody to do it. They're just floating it. This is preparation of the battlefield.
Huh. Interesting. So what you're saying there is that this issue of nitrogen, this issue of taking the farms, is just the first step. It's the first step to taking the food, essentially taking control of food. But why are these people trying to take control of the food? What is the end goal here? How can we see the
Control.
woods through the trees? Because at the moment, for those again uninitiated, this is all quite ethereal. For those who are unfamiliar with the WEF and what their plans are, and the fact that multiple governments are signed up, and the fact that Mark Rutte is Klaus Schwab's right-hand man, people still don't want to accept that. In Dutch Parliament, it was pointed out that Rutte wrote the foreword in the book, and all these other nice little communications he's had with Klaus, and people outright ignore these things.
Yeah, it's right in your face. That's the thing about it. Evil presents itself and it tells you who it is, like Mein Kampf. Hitler's
Hmm.
like, hey, we're gonna
This is
kill
what
the
we're going to
Jews.
do. And people thought
We're gonna
it's just
we're gonna
writings. He's
go.
not really going to carry that out. Yeah.
He's just a madman rambling. Maybe, but every once in a while, one of these madmen actually gets into a position to execute, right?
Yeah.
And Hitler and so many others have done. Mao, Xi at this point is doing, exterminating Uyghurs, Tibetans. I've been to Tibet, and you can see they're doing the same sort of thing they did in Hong Kong. They're lining up Taiwan to do the same thing. Netherlands, the same thing. But a lot of people don't want to see it either. They don't want to see it because if you see it, you're like, I have to do something. You know, it doesn't exist if I don't see it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
because to do something can obviously, when everything is still going nicely, relatively, you don't want to disrupt your entire life. Like like look at the French. I used to think that every time you go to France, I go there. All I got to do is stop in the airport, and they'll be having a protest in the airport about something I don't even know. I don't speak French. They're yelling in
Yeah.
French, and I'll be like, "What are you protesting about?" Like, okay, whatever. So and but I used to think, why are they always doing this? They're always protecting these little farms, and I thought it was a little overwrought. But now I see their wisdom, right?
Hmm.
And I talked with some Dutch farmers about this. They're like, we need to be more like the French. And I'm like, you know what? They're kind of a pain, but I agree. You know what I mean? Because the French government is basically terrified of their farmers.
Hmm.
It's not that the farmers do murder or anything like that. They're not blowing stuff up. But if you mess with the farmers, they'll like block all the streets. They'll be blocking the trains. They'll be spewing cow shit all over the government offices, and the police will be covered with it. They'll go hog wild, man. They go Planet of the Apes, and they'll affect the elections, right? And so nobody wants to like poke the
Piss them off.
farmers too
Yeah.
much. And so as a result, you go to these little villages in France, and you get some really good food at a good, nice price. It's local food, and it seems very healthy. It feels that way, when you're there. And I'm like, these French, they can be a pain, but they ain't wrong. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 They're doing
Yeah.
things the
It's
right
all.
way. In essence, they're
I
looking
have
after
to
their own.
apologize. I have to apologize for just some of it's just thoughts that I had about them, but other times I would say it like they're going over the top. But no, they weren't. They were actually right, and that's what the Dutch needs to be. And you'll hear some of the Dutch last night or every day, just about when I'm out with them. They're like, we don't stand up the way the French do.
No.
And I keep telling, I'm in Texas a lot. I'm in there in Texas quite a lot, and the Texans are always like so proud and blah blah blah. We have the Alamo, and I'm like, listen, your border is wide open, right?
Yeah.
Your border is my border. I'm American. Texas border is you're not the I know you're the Republic of Texas and all this bullshit, but guess what? Your border is wide open. You got the big old cowboy hat, but why aren't you closing the border? Right? Get on your damn horses and go down there and close the border. Or get in your, I'll go with you, right? I'm always on that border. I'm down on the Mexican side, I'm on the Panama side, I'm in Colombia, I'm on Texas, Arizona, New Mexico. I'm watching that. I'm down there midnight, 2 a.m, watching this stuff go on alone often. And where's all the Texans? Seriously, they're like the Dutch farmers. Talk shit. Now it's time to do something, right? Because the government's clearly not, and your political parties are clearly selling you out, right? But you can stop this. You can take your little tractors, which are big tractors, if you're together, and you can block Rotterdam
Yeah.
Harbor. You know what I mean? You can
Then
block
what's
these
this got to
highways.
do with the reason for them to control the food? What's this got to do with that?
Once they control the food, they control us. They're going to the central bank, digital monies, right?
Yeah, CBDC, central bank
Everything.
digital
Yeah,
currencies. Yeah.
exactly. Everything that we, yeah, exactly. Everything that we're, all these different control mechanisms are coming into place. AI is just getting more and more powerful. Like all these words that we're speaking now, right now, the body language that we're emitting now it's all being trapped, right? Everything, right? And they'll be able to analyze all this in split seconds later and probably label me a terrorist or something for just the things I've said now. And you can go on trial online. A computer can put you on trial, right? Here's the sentence you spoke. Did you not speak this sentence? That's against the terrorism rules. It can be post hoc, right? I mean,
Mm.
it can be, it can be like something you said 10 years ago, right?
Well, they
And
made people who were standing up in school board meetings. They called them terrorists in the US not too long ago. There was an FBI piece on like mums and dads who were saying that they don't want X, Y, and Z in a school board meeting. They're terrorists. So
well,
yes,
look at our faces
absolutely.
now. They can say, the computers are trapping everything that we're saying, and our hand movements, and our voice intonations, our word selection, the all the complex muscles in our faces and our eyes and our blink rate and all these things. And the computers will be able to go through this. I've wondered about this for years. It's just a matter of time until the AI is there to analyze old films and to see who was lying. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because there's a lot of language being spoken on our faces. Sometimes it's easy to read. Like there's some emotions that are very easy to read. The basic seven, right? Sadness, happiness, anger, disgust, surprise, right? You can those surprise is the same in every culture, right? Whether it's somebody that, yeah, like you look
Yeah,
surprised,
wide
like
eyed.
so, like you know, joy actually, and anger, fear, happiness, disgust. All these are the same in every culture, actually. Like whether it's somebody living near Mount Everest or the tip of Tierra del Fuego or whatever, it's the same. Now, what makes you disgusted may be different, but the actual facial body language from your face is the same, right? Or fear, you know what I mean? It's the same. Anger, disgust, happiness, they're surprise. That's interesting, isn't it? It's the basic seven. Anyway, but obviously the AI can read this stuff. Imagine being able to go back to films that are like, I don't know, 80 years old, and somebody saying, who did what? Or let's go back to the early 60s. Who shot John, Kennedy?
Yeah.
And you'll
It
see
wasn't the guy
somebody
they
talking.
arrested, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. But imagine we'll be able to look at him and the computer's like, he's lying. Like
Yeah.
me with the North Korean, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert on body language or anything, but every once in a while, he's working in my world now. He's talking about all these skills that he has and the way he's doing his body language. I'm like, that guy is a fraud for
Hmm.
sure. And I actually went right out on a limb that was risking everything I have. And he turned out to be a fraud. Imagine when computers can do that to billions of old hours of video and still, and analyze that and put you on trial for all these things that you've said and written, for all your emails, all your texts, all the little videos that you made on Snapchat or whatever these things are, Instagram. Yeah, we're there. We are literally there. All
Yeah.
the mechanisms are already in place.
We're about to cross the Rubicon, that's for sure. Because I think,
You can be put
the
on
intro
trial by a computer.
yeah, the introduction of CBDC is not too far away at this point with the global economic collapse as it stands. What, five banks now have fallen in the last week and a half?
I'm reading a book now. I've read more than 60 books on pandemic, right? More than 5 dozen. I'd read about 40 before this pandemic started, and then about 20 during the 2020 and 21, right? I'm reading another one now very slowly because I'm so busy with these guys. But and it's on the leper colony in Molokai, Hawaii, right? So it was a famous leper colony that started in about 1866, right after the U.S. Civil War. And it's interesting because you'll see if you got on the list, if somebody said, "Oh, he's got spots on his arm," right, and you get on the list, somehow your name gets on the list, then the sheriff comes looking for you, and you end up in Molokai. You know what I mean? You're on
Yeah.
a ship and you're out with the lepers. You might get leprosy now, right? It was just interesting because we're talking 1866, 67, 68, and it goes on. The leper colony kept going for a long time. And if you got put into that system, and they talk about it, and they go into this in the book in detail, like, hey, this one guy got put in the leper colony, and then it turns out it was just, somebody didn't like him, got him on the list somehow. Or, somebody saw you with spots, but it was really from something else.
It's the same thing with the
Because
Salem witch trials. It ended up being a case of people
exactly.
just grassing people up they didn't like. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but now you're in the system, right? Now imagine a system where it's just a computer that says, well, look at what he said 12 years ago or wrote. Or, with the AI psychologist here, well, we should cut off his money. And it's just a computer that does it. So your money's cut. And there's a warrant issued for your arrest. Oh, you're in your Tesla car. Drive to the police station. Go underground. Lock behind you. It's like get put
It's
into a cell. It literally can happen like that. This isn't that sci-fi at all. I mean, they've already got the ability to repossess your car or turn your air conditioner off or, turn your radio off, make your windows down all the time. I mean, they can take control of your car right now. That's if you plug your phone into your car. I'm gonna tell you something almost nobody knows. You plug your phone into your car, it'll everything on your phone is accessible. If you're talking on your phone, if you're chatting on your phone, if the police have a warrant, or if they just want to get into it, everything on your phone goes right through your car. Almost nobody seems to know that, right? This is like the NSA in your pocket.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's scary to see the minutiae of detail that they can get from your phone as well, to every single tap on the screen as well. They can get that data if they need it. They can see exactly how you use it, how you abused it. But then,
and some apps, they can tell like how old you are, how fast do you type on the thing,
yeah,
what size font do you use, what how do you carry it? Is it in your pocket? Is it in a pocketbook? They can tell if you're gay or not by the way you tap the phone. They can tell a lot about your race. There's a lot they can tell just by the motions of your phone and these sorts of things, when you pick it up, when you lay it down.
one of the interesting things that I was listening to recently is AI has gotten so smart, it can pick up on tells that we don't even know we have. So let's say, for example, the AI will recognize that when someone posts X type of post on Instagram or Facebook, etc., then within 17 minutes they'll be leaving the house or they'll be going to the toilet. It has that level of detail on you. It knows you better than you even know yourself. But then,
oh yeah, you've heard the stories about suddenly I'm sorry, interrupt.
Go.
Like the woman, starting to get, I don't know if it's urban legend, but suddenly starting to get something in the mail or something about, being pregnant or whatever. And she doesn't even know she's pregnant, but, her father notices suddenly things like, I don't know if that's urban legend, but it's to your point that these things do know a lot about us. Or like when I was in the wars, we know when phones are co-located, right? So let's say this is a hot phone and this is not, but you went to that guy's house, and we know that they can tell what exact room I'm in right now, right? Yep. They can tell exactly where I'm at. So if you're targeting me, right, and it's not just the NSA, all these different apps, Flashlight app actually is one of them. There's tens of thousands of apps actually that have your geolocation down to a T, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be the NSA or the MSS or China or your KGB or anything. All you have to do is be somebody with money that wants to buy it, and it's all available. You can, if you want to like track your wife or husband or something, and you got the money, go buy it
legally as well. None of this is on the dark web. You can
legal.
Get information brokers on the normal internet. You don't have to download a Tor browser or anything. It's insane.
It's like buying corn. Yep. It's like buying corn. You want to buy some corn?
Probably cheaper at this point. Like corn is probably going up in price because of the farmer situations. So it's cheaper to get the data.
So that's one of the ways that we would kill enemies in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like they would take their phone to where they're hiding weapons or something.
That's how they located Bin Laden, right? The backtracking. When I spoke to John Kiriakou, they were talking about tracking people's phone calls, and there were 17 sites that's how they tracked and found. Oh, sorry, not Bin Laden. Al-Baghdadi, or no? Oh God, I can't remember the fella's name. The one who was tortured, and the torture case that was then whistleblown from John Kiriakou.
Down in Guantanamo, you mean? Or?
Yeah. He's now down in Guantanamo still. Oh gosh, Zahabi, maybe.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. I'm sorry, I've forgotten his name.
Yeah,
but I know what you're talking about. He was like kept awake and and all sorts of things.
The torture case that ended up getting John sent to prison for whistleblowing on the torture case. But
or our idiotic CIA went to Italy. I think it was Rome. And they all checked into the same hotel, right?
Yeah.
And this is like
the Strava app that then gave away the locations of secret bases in Afghanistan because runners were using the Strava app, mapping their runs and uploading it. And by the heat map of where people were, they were giving away their location. But
it's like what world did they come from that using DJI drones at secret bases is okay? You know what I mean? Seriously, do you have to be told that this is not to be done? You know what I mean?
Elite level of the military.
If you're over like 16 years old, you shouldn't have to be told not to do this. You know what I mean?
But then So they get the farms, they take control of your food. They're attempting to take control of the money with the collapse that's happening with the introduction of CBDCs. They're going to create this tri-state city. What's the overall goal? And how does that then rope into creating a war in the east of Europe?
Keep in mind, it's not as if they're going to have a perfect plan that everybody agrees on, or they just have control of all the levers and the whistles and all that of the universe. They don't, right?
There's a lot of plates
So
to spin. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. And different people are spinning different plates, and they're like, "Hey, don't do that," blah blah blah. You're killing my shipping company or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I mean, so there's going to be the internal friction that always happens, right? And so it happens on that scale as well. It's funny because life seems to be sort of fractal. Everything that happens on a small scale happens on a big scale, and I think by the same mathematics, it just has different zeros, different number of zeros, whether it's a tiny avalanche or a Mount Everest size avalanche. And it's the same with the human dynamics, right? Like for instance, we all have seen human psychopaths. That's like that one person, right? But there's also entire countries that operates like a psychopath, like because of the
China.
leadership.
Yeah.
China is clearly, and Germany occasionally just goes completely psycho, right?
Austria during the lockdowns.
Yeah, exactly. Even Kiwi land, even the place where everybody's like, I'm going to go to Kiwi land down in New Zealand where everything's great and the rainbows and all this stuff. And next thing you know, it's gone total
Crazy as
over
it
the
was.
top.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's not back to the point of Ukraine and these sorts of things. If I were to start a war that would impinge on the global food supply, that would certainly be it or one of them. I mean, that's a big one. Others would be cutting Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2.
Oh,
Nord
wow.
Stream.
Yeah. Funnily, that kind of happened by the US for all intents and purposes.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Thank you.
You should see that what I was talking about all last year. Of course, Nord Stream 2 was pressurized, but not actually flowing and now we're blaming Ukraine for doing it, whatever. And so,
I remember Joe Biden standing on stage saying, if they do it, then there's going to be hell to pay, and they're going to make sure that Russia, learns about it. Yeah, and then within a week or two, Nord Stream 2, and funnily enough, the day before that happened, Norway tested their pipeline.
Yeah, that's strange, right. And they opened it to Poland. Yeah. And then right afterwards, Poland's having the ribbon cutting or whatever. And Poland is like, hey, thank you, the United States, as the sea is bubbling. Interestingly, long before that happened, if you just look up my name and Nord Stream, or my name, Michael Yon, and BASF, right? Yep. BASF is it's the biggest chemical company in the world. It's in the biggest plant is in Ludwigshafen, Germany, but they have plants all over the place, right? And so I visited there twice last year. If I had time, I'd go there, tomorrow probably, but I have to go to Japan or something. But the BASF creates a lot of the nitrogen-based fertilizers, right? Let me give a little history lesson if we have time, because this is important to understand more of the nitrogen thing and how we're setting conditions for famine that I've been warning about. So all last year, I was warning about BASF. If BASF closes, that's Europe having a heart attack, right? And just about maybe 10 days ago or so, BASF announced cutting another 2,600 jobs at Ludwigshafen, which is where their 2 ammonia plants are. Now, let's go back in history. In the 1800s, we were using bird guano from around the world to fertilize farms, and farms were getting much more, abundant with this nitrogenous fertilizers from the bird guano. In fact, bat guano and bird guano. In fact, there was I've forgotten the name of the law, but the United States passed a law in the 1800s that if any American found like an island that was, had bird guano, the entire U.S. Navy and Army would defend that island, because that was very important for your national security, because the country with the best food supplies, that's like having a good Navy. You know what I mean? That's really important. And
every
so
army
food
marches on its belly, right?
That's right. And it's harder to cut you off and these sorts of. So anyway, we were getting ahead, and Germany was getting elbowed out. In Germany, they're always got great scientists. And so a chemist named Fritz Haber, he in 1905 wrote a book on thermodynamics in which he described being able to take the natural gas, take the hydrogen off the natural gas, strip the hydrogen off, and combine it with this nitrogen that we're breathing now and make ammonia, right? So in 1905, he wrote a book on thermodynamics saying you can strip off this hydrogen, combine it with the nitrogen we're breathing, and make ammonia. Now, it's hard to do. And in 1908, he had his eureka moment, and he made a tiny amount. But it was difficult, but he did it. And so in 1913, another German chemist named Karl Bosch, he was hired at BASF, Ludwigshafen, to make this an industrial scale, right? So he took this Fritz Haber's process, they call it the Haber process, and Bosch made it industrial. So they started in 1913. By 1915, BASF at Ludwigshafen was making industrial scale nitrogen fertilizers, urea, ammonium sulfate, minimum nitrate, and explosives galore. World War I, right? Because you can make explosives out of the same process, right? So it's called the Haber-Bosch process. Haber came up with the idea. Bosch took it industrial. Haber-Bosch is one of the most important chemical processes in all of humanity, right? So if you look at the population of the world from 1950 on, you'll see it go, right. Now, it's not only because of nitrogenous fertilizers, but that is one of the big reasons. It's also because of other things like better water and, pesticides and blah, 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 right? There's a lot of things that a lot of technologies came together, right? But that was one. And this nitrogenous fertilizer is really important. And that's why I've been warning about the natural gas pipelines and that sort of thing. And I went to BASF last year, and actually Masako Ganaha, the Japanese journalist, was with me, and she was making video. When I asked one of the men at the plant, I said, what happens if Nord Stream gets cut? Right. I was very specific. Nord Stream was still wide open. There was no indication it would be cut, but I'm like, chances of Nord Stream being cut are flip the coin. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a pretty high chance.
Yeah.
I don't know who will do it, but it would probably be the United States or somebody in our corner anyway, right? Certainly not Germany,
No,
because the pipeline is owned. Was invested. The investors were Germany and Russia, right? They built it, right, with their money and their labors, because it connected. And you can see President Trump, when he was president, warning the Germans, and they're laughing at him. You seen that video before?
Yeah,
he's like,
yeah. When he tells them that they're dependent on Russia and they need to get their act together.
Yeah, for those of us who were tracking, we were like, I wouldn't be laughing at him. I mean, that's like, you see that movie, what was it, Full Metal Jacket or whatever, and the drill sergeant's like, Pyle, put your throat into my hand. You know what I mean? And he's like choking him. I'm like, well, that's exactly what Germany did to Russia's hand. He's like, and Germany's like, But anyway, but that doesn't mean we should have blown it up. You know what I mean?
No.
Especially when we're going into what appears to be conditions for global famine, which I believe we're going to go into. Right. And I've been warning about that since early 2020, that it's all about conditions. It's not about sparks. Right. And you can see cutting off whether the food supply from Ukraine or greatly reducing it, cutting off nitrogenous fertilizer production to much lower levels, higher energy costs. When you raise energy costs, you raise costs of absolutely everything. Right. And we saw a metal company in Saxony, Germany, which is old East Germany, that just it's been apparently in business for 600 years, just went bankrupt. I just saw it in the German news yesterday. Yeah, so after 600 years, according to a German news report yesterday, this metal company in Saxony is now bankrupt. It survived the Nazis and the communists and Genghis Khan. I don't know who else came through. I have no idea. Attila the Hun. Because it was probably making his swords
Sometime.
and spears and something. You know what I mean? It's like, they were probably using that metal to fight the Romans or something. So I mean or maybe the Romans were using. I have no idea. But the point is,
It was there for a while. Yeah.
It was somebody, and now it's gone bankrupt, and so you can see the deindustrialization of Europe is happening. Now, keep in mind, the WEF has been crystal clear that they want to diminish the population of the world to 500 million. This isn't conspiracy theory. So that would be like 15 out of 16 people. Sayonara.
Gone.
So
Yeah.
what are these jabs done with fertility? I don't know. It's questionable at this point. Something doesn't feel right, does it?
I don't think it's questionable, but some people will. Yeah.
As somebody who studies information war, I saw that coming a mile away, and I was just like, "Don't do it."
Yeah.
You can see all the signs and symptoms are there that this is an information campaign, like compelled speech or censoring people or seizing people's bank accounts who said things they didn't like. It's like red flags. It was like every day they shot another red star cluster into the sky. You know what I mean? Like every night there goes another emergency flare, and yet people are like, "You're just a conspiracy theorist." And I'm like, well, at some point, just go ahead and take your jab. And I'm sizing up your house because I'll probably end up living in it when you're not. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but by all means, go jab up. It's a nice Tesla. It's like, I mean, seriously,
I don't want the
at
Tesla.
some point, at some point, as a war correspondent, who spent years in combat and watched a lot of things happen, at some point, I'm going to just tell them there's a silver lining around every mushroom cloud. And if you want to go jab up, these are big boy rules. We're all men here. If you want to be a fool, go be a fool, right? And that's it's not my responsibility other than to warn you. I have done it, right? That's it.
It's interesting that you take such a hardline stance on it.
I believe in freedom, and freedom is I've given you the information. I've given you the information that there's a tiger in that jungle because there's a trail of bones out there. Don't go into the jungle. I remember one time in India, I was in Hardwar. I was near Hardwar at a place called Lakshman Jula, and there was a 23-year-old Israeli. He wanted to cross the Ganges River there by the suspension bridge, and I told him, "Don't do it." His name was Ori Yelenik. It was 23, and I said, "Don't do it." And look at the river, man. It's loud, right? There's like whirlpools under the bridge, and it's like gray water.
Idea.
It's not even white water. It's like gray water. There's like trees going down. I said, "Don't do it." Anyway, he died. He's gone, right? And I helped look for his body. We never found him. He's gone. And, at the end of the day, he's a man. He's 23, and people say, "Oh, they're just a kid," or whatever. When I was 19 years old, I was a Green Beret, right? He's not a child. You're a man. I feel bad for your family and that sort of thing, but you're a man. You were warned and you did it. We will move on without you. Bottom line. So this is the way we're playing now with these death jabs and everything else. You've been warned, right? That's all I can do. I'm not here to take your. If I were the dictator of the world, I would still let Ori cross that river. I wouldn't send the police to take him. I'd say, "Hey, start your cameras. Ori, you've been warned." You know what I mean? I want to get a video of me warning you. But you're free to do it.
I'm with you, and it's. I said this to you the other day on the phone. This is why of the places that I'd move to if I was allowed into the US as a result of my lack of a shot passport. Florida would be the place that I'd want to go to because it's the place that I see in the US with the most freedoms, or at least respecting the individual's rights. And it's what I was saying of the fact that actually we live in a fake democracy in Europe and in the UK. It's not a proper democracy, but there's a big difference between a democracy and a constitutional republic like you have in the US. In a democracy, the rights of the minority can be infringed upon, whereas in a constitutional republic, those rights are protected as a result of the constitution, regardless of who's in power. But what can those people do now in order to at least attempt to protect themselves? We haven't even touched on the migrant crisis. We haven't touched on that human osmotic pressure that you've spoken about before. But what can Joe Bloggs down the road do to at least try to protect themselves? You've already mentioned the energy prices. You already mentioned the food situation and things like that. So how can people look forward and at least try to better the situation for themselves?
Well, first of all, it's really important that you actually be a prepper at this point. And I know preppers have been
Demonized, made fun of, made to look like the Alabama of the world.
Yeah, exactly. And at this point, seriously, if people try to demonize preppers, I think that they're highly unintelligent. I really don't think much of them at this point. And because I don't have time for that. Again, I'm a war correspondent. I spent years in wars. It's a man's world out there. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to warn you, don't do that. I might even warn you twice or three times. And at some point, I'm just going to roll the camera and watch you get blown up. You know what? And it's a free world. And if you're not prepared and you don't have food, and I warned you for 3 years, and you come and try to steal my food, I am prepared for that as well. Right. And so, and as are many people. Right. Now, if you've tried to prepare and you didn't have the assets to do it, that's a different story. I mean, you've tried as much as you can, and so we're going to try to help you through. You know what I mean? For sure. 100%, because your heart's in the right place. You're trying. You're going to be this one lady. I have a friend down in Texas, and he's a retired military guy, right? And he goes to church, and he told me he's making a spreadsheet of all the skills of everybody at his church because he's pulling them together, right? And he said this one older lady, and she's a widow, and she lives alone. And she was afraid. She's like, I don't have the money. I don't have any skills that are useful. And he's like, hold on. Your heart's in the right place. You raised grandchildren. You know how to run a restaurant, a daycare center, a psychologist's office. You raised children. You know what I'm saying? A psychologist's office because you ran a family. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what I mean. You know what I mean? How are you going to raise a family without being a psychologist? You know what I mean? You got to be a diplomat and authoritarian sometimes. But he's like, you know how to do stuff, but let's go through, like, what do you know how to do? And she's like, well, I know how to can food. I'm from the old days. He's like, canned food, that's what we need. So
yeah.
The young people don't know how to do that, and that's an important skill. So he said, you've got a job. You're the commander of canning operations or something like that. I forgot what he told me. It was something like, I need to call him up and ask him again. And he was like, you're like going to be in charge of canning operations. So this is what you need to do. Make a list of all the things that you need, the type of jars you need, the types of lids, the type of cookers, pressure cookers, the seals, and you need vinegar, salt. Just tell me what you need. Make a big list of it, and don't hold back. You just make the list. Don't you worry about the money. And I will make that appear. And then you are not to be the canner other than to be showing the children how to do it. And to show others how, so that everybody, you're now a teacher. So you are very useful. You're very helpful. And plus your heart's in the right place. You want to help. So if you want to help, we'll find you a job. You know what I mean? There's no problem about that. You don't have to be rich. You just have to be somebody that adds to the team. And it doesn't matter what your age is, whatever. Come on, let's go.
So your recommendation would be is to form a community that could survive if shit hits the fan.
100%. I mean, it's a very important, and I don't care if you're Rambo, you're not going to do well alone, right? I mean, there's some people that can live well alone out in the forest forever, but it's not much of the kind of life. I like people too much. You know what I mean? And so, one of the things I found, for instance, about famines is the people, there are people that get through the famines with no problem. For instance, a famine in Japan in 1833, there was a guy named Kenjiro, and there's actually he might be the screensaver on my phone here. No, it rotates, but there's statues of this guy Kenjiro in Japanese schools all over Japan, right? And because he was an autodidact, his parents died when he was young, so he used to read constantly, and he worked on the farm, and his uncle wouldn't let him read because the oil was too expensive. So he found some way to make oil himself, and so he would read at night when he wasn't working, and he taught himself a lot of stuff. And so and then he became famous because of he sort of changed agriculture in Japan, to put it mildly. And for instance, in 1833, a famine was coming, and Kenjiro was like, hey, the leaves are falling off the trees in June. Why are they doing that? it's like it's autumn. And why do the eggplants taste like fall eggplants instead of summer eggplants? They taste better in the fall, he said, right? He said, we might not have a summer this year. And he started warning people to grow millet and to grow less rice and to grow other things that are more hardy against the cold. And there really was a famine, and a huge amount of people died. It was 1833, right? But none of the people in his area died because they were all prepared. They grew the right stuff. They stored more. He was persuasive. I mean, he had some problems persuading everybody, but he, finally got the critical mass going, and he saved his community. That and other things he became famous for. At other times when there was food crisis, they started calling him in, like, Kenjiro, what's going on here? And he'd be like, okay, do this, do that. First of all, you have to listen to me. You have to, and if I'm wrong, what's the big deal? It's like,
you've got some supplies.
You've got some extra millet and you didn't get as much rice as you wanted. But first of all, don't make sake out of your rice. This isn't the time we're going to be drinking sake. We're going to save everything. You know what I mean? And another famine, I think it was 1833. No, 1783. I think 1783. I think it was 1783. It was the Tenmei famine in Japan. There was another Japanese guy. He noticed that things were like not right. He said, there's always people that notice. There's always a few people that are a little ahead. There's always these Alex Joneses running around crazy. They're like, he's a little crazy, but he ain't a little wrong. He's a little bit right, a little bit too right.
He's right a lot of the time. People talk about a broken clock is right twice a day. That fella's been right about 12 times a day or 24 times a day.
His batting average is really high. I mean, he gets a few things wrong and they hang that around his neck, but his batting average is quite high. You would definitely put him in to try to hit the home run. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, Alex struck out. So they're like, well, 1999 or whatever about the school shoot. He gets something wrong and people go crazy about it. And I'm like, you look at the things, and I was in his studio about, I don't know, 5 weeks ago or something. Was it 2 weeks ago? No,
was that 2-3 weeks ago? Because it was right before you were going to be coming over.
Oh, you're right. It was 3 weeks ago.
The reason why I emailed. Yeah.
I can't keep it straight. So, and I like him a lot more in person. It's the same with Jordan Peterson, by the way. I was just on his show again today. It just aired maybe 5 or 6 hours ago. And so when I was with Jordan, I spent 3 days with him here in Netherlands. I actually liked him a lot. On TV, he's still aloof and distant and stuff. But when you're with him, like with Alex, he's very likable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And seems like a sound fella. Right.
Yeah. I was like, Alex, I started telling him about hunting cannibals, and then, that song he did about, I'm going to eat my neighbor.
Yes. Yeah. Fantastic.
Everybody kept sitting there because the people that know I hunted cannibals, I was just taking a break from the action, and I was like, I was in India and I came across these cannibals, and I was like, what? Cannibals? and I started hunting them down.
Unfortunately,
there was like one from Texas. Oh, there was one from Houston that had joined the cult. Jeez. His name was Gary Stevenson. He was born in December 3rd, 1950 in Houston. Gary Rayburn Stevenson, for those who have access to databases. And that was him. And so people have often asked me, why'd you go hunt cannibals? I'm like, well, I needed a break. And I'm telling you what, it was the funnest thing I ever did. I mean, I wouldn't recommend cannibal hunting because it could go wrong really quickly.
I mean, they can get rid of the evidence.
They are smart.
I'm just saying, if they find you, they know you're doing it. They can get rid of the evidence pretty quick.
One night I was out on the Gangama, the Ganges River, right? They call it Mother Ganges, so Gangama, right? So, and it was a full moon. And I was out with some of these guys alone with them, right? And they're drinking out of human skulls. They always drink from their left hand, and they use these 3 fingers, right? So they'll put the cup well, not a cup, it'll be a skull, right? So they do it like this in their left hand.
Interesting.
And they drink like this out of the skull. And they're drinking whiskey out of their skulls and stuff, and they are drunk out of their skulls. And it was getting about midnight when the moon was right overhead, and their body language changed. I was like, acted like I had to go to take a leak. I just walked away from the fire because we were just by the Ganges River. Like there was just me and these guys drinking out of skulls. And I went, I ran out of there as fast as I could, man. I ran into the dark,
Get out of Dodge while you can.
I had weapons hidden back away, which I always do, but but I shouldn't say that, but but I didn't, and I just kept running, and I got out of there. I get back to my guest house. I'm like,
Yeah.
it didn't feel right.
No.
Let's make
Probably
note to self: don't go out with cannibals at midnight on the Ganges River on a full moon.
doesn't sound like
Nothing,
a great end to a
nothing happened.
story. No.
It just felt off, and
I-
I listened to that voice so closely. If that little voice is like, I need your attention,
Yeah.
I'm like, you've got my full attention. You're
Yeah.
about to get killed. Bye.
Hey, it's kept you going for the last X amount of years, going to combat zones and everything. So I think it's a pretty good voice. But look, I know I've taken up a butt ton of your time. I'm really, really grateful. I apologize if I've made you late for anything else, as I know you've got a lot going on. But I wanted to say thank you. What would be sort of the top 3 things that you'd say to people to get their shit in order, given everything that's going on?
Everybody's situation is different. Even if you live in the same town or whatever, your situation is different. Whether because there's so many things that go into your situation, like your different skills, right? Are you a fisherman, or are you or whatever? You know what I mean? You might have a lot of money, you might have no money, but you know how to do other stuff. Like that lady, she doesn't have a lot of money, and she doesn't have a lot of. She didn't think she had a lot of skills because she didn't hook up with the right team until she found my friend, and he's like, "We need you. You're in charge of this, right?" And now she's happy, and and she's teaching them already, and there's not even anything going on yet. Well, there is, but not survival yet, right? And so figure out what is your situation, because everybody's different. If you live in Manhattan, it's different than living in Key West or Nome, Alaska, right?
Mhm.
And so start to look at your weaknesses and your strengths, because everybody has strengths and everybody has weaknesses, and it's not just you; it's also your connections, your human networks, right? And your knowledge of your where can you go to? Should you stay where you're at? Should you move somewhere else? Where do you get your water from? Is always the first question you should always ask yourself. Everybody should know where their actual water. Let me show you something. I don't advertise for this company, by the way. I don't have any contacts with them. But so I don't make any money on this at all. I'm not sending any link or anything like that. But this is what I use, and you can see how old it is too, man. This thing, I've
Jeez,
used this
that
thing
thing
in
is
India,
used.
all over India. I've used this thing in wars and just dozens of countries. It's just a Katadyn water filter. You can get them on Amazon.
Holy
This
cow.
thing's worn out, man. But it still works. So this is this is this is the filter. You can see it's getting like an hourglass because it's getting old.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's dry right now. But anyway, it's a great water filter. I've used that thing. I've never had any waterborne illness to my problem. So if I'm out here and I have some problem because all the power goes out or whatever,
Which
I
one
need
is
some
it?
fresh water.
Out of interest?
It's a
or-
Katadyn. Katadyn. It's not written very well on it, is it? It's a Katadyn.
Okay. Nice.
Katadyn. It's a Swiss thing. Katadyn, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like this, right? And that's how it works. I didn't screw it in yet.
Good.
But anyway, I was just showing you how the filter in there. And it's really nice. I mean, and this is how you clean it. You just unscrew it, and you take your little Brillo pad and you clean it off and let it dry and put it back in.
Oh, there you go.
Look how much I've used that thing, man. It's an
Wow.
hourglass. Well, you can't see it very well, but
I get a little bit of an
So,
idea
I mean,
at least.
that's my emergency. Of course, you're not going to use that at home. I mean, that'd be a pain in the butt to keep, Jezebel, pump the thing again. You're gonna be worn out,
Hey,
It's
that's why
not
I'm
gonna be
having
fun.
kids, so they could do it for me. Spare
All right.
parts and slave labor.
Y'all can fight over who does the water, but it better be done.
So, prep, get
That-
yourself
that-
some water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any
I've
other
got
tips?
plenty.
And then I'll let you crack on for the night.
Oh, prepping is such a huge thing, but I shouldn't say that because that puts people off, and then they won't do any prepping at all. I don't mean what I'm saying is it's a
It's
huge.
important.
Yeah, it's
not
very
a huge thing
important.
to do, but it's an
Yeah.
important thing to do. Like
Yeah,
huge
just-
isn't
just-
important.
Yeah, and you need to get on it. like
Yeah.
if you're not, and stop making fun of prepper people if you are, because people are going to be making fun of you and they're going to be eating you, as Alex Jones would say, especially if you're a liberal. But I love
Gonna
that
eat my
song.
neighbors. Yeah.
I told him,
What
I
a
was like,
clip.
Alex, I have hunted cannibals and now I've hunted you down to your studio. He's like, he's like, that was parody. And I'm like, okay, whatever, Alex. And it's like, I think about it after 2 weeks of no food, it won't be parody for you. I don't know.
Uh,
Anyway,
Funnily enough, I know you spoke about that. You done a long fast previously just to make sure that you could get through it, right?
I did 28 days with no
Yeah.
food, zero
Yeah.
food. I don't mean a liquid diet or any of that bullshit. That's not a fast. I mean
Water.
water.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't drink alcohol. I drink no alcohol. I don't do any drugs or anything else. And I just drink water and sometimes too much coffee. But when I was fasting, I did take, and I love green tea and stuff.
Yeah.
I love the teas and stuff. But you know what? You don't need all those. I did a lot of combat, but I don't have PTSD, and I'm not like crazy and crying and I think one of the reasons is there's this expectation that if you do any combat, you went to a war, so you're supposed to be an alcoholic now. So it's like there's this expectation that, oh, since you've done that, you're supposed to be a druggie now and live on the street or something. You know what I mean? It's like, that's bullshit. You need to reframe the expectation. It's like, no, you did that. You've fought for your country. Now you need to come back and continue with your leadership. You know what I mean? And use it in your community and in your family. And I don't want to hear about any of this crybaby shit. You were in combat, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a crap. I was too. I did a tremendous amount of firefights, a tremendous amount, right? Like very close firefights. Guys killed all around me many times. You can see a lot of my videos and stuff. And guess what? I don't drink. I don't smoke. I don't do drugs. And you don't need to. And I'm fine. And I sleep well at night. I sleep like a baby, unless I drink too much coffee, and then it's a problem.
That's a different story. But I'll let you crack on with that then. Michael, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And
so when you're getting ready for prepping, you don't have to fill up the basement with alcohol unless you want to do it for trading or something.
Like as grain will probably be a decent form of currency. But no, thank you. Thank you very much.